A very good morning to all. This lecture is meant for BA Part 2nd class, and here in this lecture we are going to talk about paper first. Yesterday we talked about Thomas Gray, his contribution in literature, and basically we talked about Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard, a poem that is prescribed in the syllabus. Due to some technical error, the lecture was left in between, so let us begin with the poem again. As I told you that this poem, Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard, is composed in 128 lines, and the form in which it is written is quatrain. Quatrain means 4-line stanza. We have already discussed it. There are 32 stanzas of 4 lines each in this poem. So let us begin with the poem. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly over the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Curfew tolls. Actually, in medieval Europe, a bell was rung in the evening to mark the time for extinguishing all fires. It was around 8 o'clock in the evening. The time was there. Here, knell means the death bell. So, the first line indicates that the church bell that is ringing in the evening indicates the end of the daytime, as if day has ended or it is the death of the daytime. The lowing herd wind slowly over the lea. Lowing is the particular sound that is being created by the cattle when they are moving. Wind, they are moving in a zigzag course. The lowing herd means cattle, slowly over the lea. They are moving very slowly because they are tired due to the day labor, because they have walked to great pasture lands and all. So now they are coming back to their meadows and they are walking very slowly, and when they are moving, they are making or creating sounds. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way. The ploughman, the farmer, he is also moving back to his home. He is also coming back to his home, and he plods his weary way. He is walking very very laboriously, because he has worked a lot during the daytime. And in weary way, the writer has used the transferred epithet, because it is not the way which is weary or tired. It is the ploughman who is walking on the road. He is tired and leaves the world to darkness and to me. The whole landscape is enveloped by darkness. The poet is the only person left in the darkness of village churchyard. So, the second stanza. The second stanza. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight, and all the air a solemn stillness holds, save where the beetle wheels his droning flight, and drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. Fade. Fade means, we can say fade means dim. It becomes dim. Now fades the glimmering landscape. Glimmering means appearing very faintly or very faded. Landscape on the sight. The landscape, the atmosphere that the writer is able to perceive, it is very much dark. Why? Because of the twilight. It is the evening time. It is told in the beginning stanza. And all the air a solemn stillness holds. And the entire atmosphere, it is also calm, because no noise as such is there outside. Solemn stillness holds. There is no noise. There is calmness. It is prevailing everywhere. Save where the beetle wheels his droning flight. The only sound that is, audible at the time is the wheeling sound of the drone, of the beetle, when it is moving in a circle while flying and making a dull humming sound like the drone of the honeybee. And drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. And another sound that the writer is able to perceive is the sharp sound or jangling sound made by the bells tied round the neck of the cattle. So here the writer says that the shades of darkness are gradually descending upon the earth. The darkness is spreading all over. In the evening twilight gradually goes, and darkness covers the calm atmosphere. This calm atmosphere is only disturbed sometimes by humming of the flying beetle and the jingling sounds which are made by the small bells attached to the neck of the cattle when they move their necks in drowsiness in their enclosure at some distance. And drowsy tinklings lull the distant falls. So here it is. The third stanza now. Save that from yonder ivy-mantled tower, the moping owl does to the moon complain of such as wandering near the secret bower molest her ancient solitary reign. Yonder means at a distant place. Ivy-mantled tower. Ivy is a particular kind of a plant. Ivy is an evergreen creeper, and it generally covers dissolute and ruined buildings. So yonder ivy mantled tower, there is a tower which is all covered with the ivy creeper. The moping owl does to the moon complain. Moping owl which is very much silent and dull. It is complaining to the moon of such as wandering near the secret bower molest her ancient solitary reign. What the owl is complaining about is that there is someone who is passing up the place where the owl has her seat, and this is being disturbed. The peace and the solitude of the atmosphere is being disturbed by that particular person who is passing up by the side of the tower. So the writer says that the peaceful atmosphere is sometimes disturbed. The peace of the atmosphere is disturbed by the hooting of the owl. The owl complains to the moon about the persons who are wandering about and disturbing her loneliness. The owl is gloomy and sullen and dark. She sits in a quiet manner on the tower, covered with ivy, which is an evergreen creeper, under the moonlight. When she is disturbed to live in her lonely place, she complains to the moon because it has been her privilege to live in solitary places since the ancient times in every country. Molest here refers to disturb, right? So let us come to the fourth stanza. Beneath those rugged elms that your trees shade, where heaps the turf in many a mouldering heap, each in his narrow cell forever laid, the rude forefathers of the hamlet sleep. So here the writer indicates that he is talking about the rude forefathers of the villagers who are very much rude. Here does not mean that he is rough, he is having any rude kind of attitude. Rude here refers to simple and rustic people, right? So here the writer is saying beneath those rugged elms that huge trees shade. Beneath means under, rugged, hard, we can say. Rugged elms means elm trees are there and which are hard and twisted from outside. Yew trees shade. The yew tree also are there in the churches, we can say, and the tree shades several groves with its huge branches, right? It is the huge branched tree. Where heaps the turf in many a mouldering heap. The turf is a kind of grass. Mouldering heap, mounds of earth, now gradually tottering to decay. So mouldering heaps of earth. The grass is growing over there, each in its narrow cell forever laid. Each here refers to each of the villager. Narrow cell here refers to the graves, which are very much narrow, 5 or 6 feet, forever laid. They are permanently lying in their graves after their death. The rude forefathers of the hamlet sleep. Rude forefathers, these are very much rustic people, these are very much simple people who are lying in their graves of the hamlet. Hamlet means a village. So the writer is saying these are the graves of the poor ancestors of the villagers. These graves are nothing else but the heaps of earth in decaying condition. No one is caring for those graves. That's why they are in the decayed condition. These heaps lay under the elms and the yew trees. The poor forefathers of the countrymen are lying under these graves, which are covered with dry grass, are uncared for. They are exposed to heat and rain. Next stanza. The breezy call of incense-breathing moan, the swallow twittering from the straw-built shed, the cock's shrill clarion or the echoing horn, no more shall rouse them from their lowly bed. As we all know that once a person is dead, he cannot come back to his life, whatever the scene is, whatever the conditions are. So here the writer is saying the breezy call of incense breathing moon. It is the morning time, and during the morning time what happens is that morning time is very much pleasant and it is fragrant as well. Various kinds of fresh incense of the fresh flowers is is that which we can feel during the daytime. The swallow twittering from the straw-built shed, and the swallow are also there. The little birds, we can say, they are twittering from the straw-built shed. They are making or creating different kind of sounds from their straw-built shed or their nest, we can say. The cock's shrill clarion or the echoing horn. And another sound that he can listen to is the shrill or sharp sound of the cock, who is creating this sound in the early morning. A clarion is a wind instrument producing a shrill sound. So just like a clarion, the cock's sharp notes are also there. No more shall rouse them from their lowly bed. All these kinds of sounds cannot make the persons, the rustic people, the villagers who are lying in these graves, they cannot come back to their lives. Lowly bed means the graves. So here overall, if we say, the writer is saying that the forefathers of the villagers have been lying dead in their graves. Now they cannot be aroused by any kind of sound which is made in the surrounding atmosphere, whether it is the sound of the whether it is the incense of the morning breeze, whether it is the pleasant, fresh and fragrant morning, whether it is the swallow which is making its chirping sound, the cock with its too sharp voice cannot make him awake. So it is to be remembered that sound of the cock is quite clear, like the sound of the clarion, a wind instrument. Even the huntsman's horn cannot arouse them. Let us come up to the next stanza. For them, no more the blazing hearth. For them, no more the blazing hearth shall burn, or busy housewife ply her evening care. No children run to lisp their sire's return, or climb his knees the envied kiss to share. For them, for the dead forefathers who are lying buried in the graves, no more the blazing hearth shall burn. In previous times, when they used to come back from their day's labor, when they were alive, their wives were cooking food for them. The hearth was burnt for them. The food was cooked for them. Or busy housewife ply her evening care. And the housewives who were busy during the daytime, they are also caring for their husbands in the evening when they come back. No children run to lisp their sire's return. Lisp means the broken accents that are uttered by a child. So no children will be happy on the return of their parents or the father. Sire means father. They are not running to let them know about the day's happenings, or climb his knees the envied kiss to share. And now they are not running towards their father, envied kiss of their fathers, which the children used to enjoy when the parents were alive and to which the children competed amongst themselves. They are not competing now. So the writer here is saying, for these deceased ancestors or the persons or the ancestors who have died, the kitchen's fire would no more be lighted by their wives. They would not get busy anymore in preparing simple dishes sweetened by love. They used to prepare these for their husbands coming back after the day's hard labor in the fields. Their little children will no more babble loudly at the happy sight of their returning home after a whole day's absence. These small children will also not run up to their fathers, climb upon their knees and try to monopolize their affection and kiss. Let us come to the next stanza. Oft did the harvest to their sickle yield, their furrow oft the stubborn glebe hedge broke. How jocund did they drive their team afield, how bowed the boards beneath their sturdy stroke. Oft means often. Did the harvest to their sickle yield. The rustics used to reap crops with their sickles. The crops yield to the sickle of the villagers. Their furrow oft the stubborn glebe hedge broke. Furrow means plow. A furrow is a trench made by a plow and is here used in the sense of a plow. Stubborn glebe, hard ground or hard soil we can say. Hedge broken. How jocund did they drive their team afield? It is the team here refers to the oxen team or the horseage, team of the horseage. How jocund. Jocund means very happily. They used to carry the pair of their horseage or oxen afield to the field. How about the woods beneath their sturdy stroke? Woods here refers to the trees. Sturdy stroke means heavy strokes or blows of the axe edge. When they used to cut the woods out of the trees, with their heavy strokes or the blows of the axe edge, they used to cut down them. So in this stanza, the writer is saying that the farmers when they were alive worked hard in their fields. They reaped crops and felled the trees by heavy strokes of their axe edge. So the daily routine of the villagers is talked about in this stanza. Let us come to the next stanza. Let not ambition mock their usual toil, their homely joys and destiny obscure, nor grandeur hear with a disdainful smile the short and simple annals of the poor. Ambition here refers to the ambitious person. And here we can say the writer has used a a figure of speech which is personification. Ambition here is personified as if it is a man. Let not ambition mock their useful toil. Sometimes the ambitious people, they are mocking at the simple wage of these villagers, their homely joys and destiny obscure. They are mocking about their time, their labor which they are doing. They are mocking at their simple joys. They are mocking their destinies as well, which are very much hard and obscure, which are unknown. Nor grandeur here with a disdainful smile the short and simple annals of the poor. Grandeur means persons who are very much rich, who are living in pomp and show. They are mocking at them. Disdainful smile means they are very much hating them. Hateful smile they are giving when they listen to the short and simple annals means stories of the poor, stories of the lives of the poor. So the writer here says that the ambitious and wealthy people should not make fun of the simple and humble life of villagers. They should rather recognize their valuable services. They worked hard and shared their perspiration in the fields of corn to feed the whole community. The richer people should not laugh at the simple pastimes and delights of these villagers. They should not despise them because of their unknown and uneventful lives. The great and the grand have no right to smile contemptuously at the short and simple life stories of these poor people. So it's enough for today's lecture. The remaining part of the poem we will discuss in the next lecture. Thank you all.